You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Your favorite local grocery stores like Kroger, Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and more are now delivering on Uber Eats. Get 40% off your order of fresh, quality ingredients. Whether you just got home to an empty fridge or suddenly got a craving to whip up something new, you can get everything you need delivered in as little as 25 minutes. Get 40% off your order with code Kroger2026. Plus, members get $0 delivery fees. Order now on Uber Eats. Orders of $30 or more save up to $25. Ends 4/30/26. See app for details.
Grown-ups, if there's a child in your life who is interested in, curious about, or fascinated by people and places from history, then my podcast, The Past and the Curious, might just be a hit in your home. From the invention of microscopes to world-traveling dogs to fashions of the 1890s, gold rush ghost towns, and audiences going wild for walking competitions, we've got a little bit of it all. Hosted by children's author and museum educator Mick Sullivan, that's me, the show is fun, funny, engaging, honest, and beloved by kids and parents alike. Find The Past and the Curious at all the usual podcast places.
This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
Join our Patreon for extra episodes, interviews, extra content, and to help support the podcast and help us continue to do the work we do.
Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl to learn more.
We're going to say flying buttresses so many times you might as well drink when you hear it.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl.
It's the end of the Goths, y'all. Maybe.
Maybe. I mean...
This might be a two-parter.
I think it might be a two-parter. I definitely went through this script and divvied it up so that it is 2 parts. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's the beginning of the end of the Goths, y'all. It's the penultimate episode.
I can't believe we've come this far. We are so close to done. We have come to the end, or potentially the second episode from the end of our long, sweeping epic history about the Goths.
The cliffhanger before the finale.
That's right, that's what it is, in which I attempted to dodecahedron the Goths, tracing their history from humble beginnings and mysterious migrations through to the well-documented migration era, the Goths' place both inside and outside the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of not one, but 2 Gothic kingdoms, and their later influence on Germanic legend and storytelling, because I cannot shut up about Goths, you guys. I cannot.
It'll never stop. I mean, there are several books that Jenny has written on the Goths.
I swear to God, I do see a horizon in which I'm beyond the Goths, but, you know, it just takes a while. But we have one corner of Gothic history and legend and mythology as yet uncovered. And it's a question I've always wondered about. What is the connection, the exact connection really, between Goths, the literature, the architecture, the music, the fashion, and Goths, the Germanic, Hunnic, etc. people who sacked Rome and occupied Italy? Jen, did you have a Goth phase?
Well, first off, Jenny, are you still living your Goth phase?
I don't know. I mean, I own a lot of black now, but I don't really think it's the same.
Listeners, she's currently wearing a sweater with a skull on it.
I am. It's true.
She has a blatant obsession with skulls where they should not be, bones where they should not be. She is affianced to 2 ghosts who haunt our podcast. I believe she is still living her Goth phase.
That's true.
I'm very pale. That's a tick in the Goth column. There's a problem, and Jenny's going to know exactly what the problem is as soon as I say it. So like a lot of Goths, they have the great makeup. They have the really vibrant or really dark hair, right? They've got the black hair or like that dyed sort of really rich red or purple or green or whatever. Great makeup that I could never pull off. Incredible fashion. But I have very red hair.
I think that's a little bit goth, though, because red hair is associated with vampires and having no soul.
All I'm going to say is the type of red hair I have, the coppery, gingery hair, is not particularly Gothic. It's also very frizzy and very wild. So if I'd wanted to dye it to be more of one of those vibrant colors or a darker color, when my hair grows back in after being dyed, I get these roots that almost look blonde, like a really bright blonde. The up care on my hair I would never be able to pull it off. But I always was fascinated by like Gothic culture. Like I was a teenager who I was never going to be the kid who could wear all the black and the velvet. It just wasn't going to suit me. I had to go like a little edgier hippie, because I had to work with my hair.
We discussed back and forth if we should have a friend on. We both know many people who have ties to Gothic subculture. We wound up not doing it because of scheduling issues, but also because this is going to be very tenuous in terms of what we're saying being correct. So maybe it's better we just keep this among ourselves, kids. Like, that's what's going on.
We're not really talking about the modern Gothic culture exactly as it is now. We're talking about how the roots of the ancient Goths maybe echo in some stuff that we see stylistically, fashion-wise, architecturally, in, modern society.
We're just going with very broad strokes, yeah.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do here is look at the stuff that's come down to us in modern day and where it might have come from the ancient Goths that we've just spent an entire season looking at. Because there are things with our tinfoil hats on that we see as correlations. This is maybe an episode not unlike our Pictish Beast one, but I would say even in those episodes, we always give you some kind of evidence to back things up. But again, this is not for you to maybe quote in your history papers.
Right. This is an episode where we're going to take a lot of wild swings. We're going to show our work. The connections might be quite tenuous, but it's going to be fun. And we're going to drink. This is an episode where we're not taking ourselves very seriously.
I can't promise Yule levels of drunk, but I'm aiming for somewhere in the vicinity.
So how do we define Goth? Not as the ancient Germanic tribe who architected the downfall of the Roman Empire, but as the pop culture phenomenon. Is there any connection between the two? Well, sort of and sort of not. Like we just said, the connections that we're going to explore here are quite tenuous, and we're going to attempt to draw a connection between our Goths, the Goths we've been studying this whole time for like 1 million years now, and the entirety of Gothic art, music, architecture, fashion, literature, and subculture. It is a tall order. There will be a lot of broad strokes and some extremely tenuous connections made. This is not going to be a straight historical episode. This is going to be me and Jen making a lot of very questionable and potentially drunken leaps. Along the way, we'll get to explore some fascinating aspects of Gothic history that we haven't addressed yet, or at least not in a lot of depth, and which are real. So with that baseline established that all of this is going to be taken with a huge boulder of salt, lower your expectations, people.
Yeah, treat this like an episode where Julius Caesar might rock up into the scene, right?
He might. I can't guarantee that he won't. So let's talk about just Gothic subculture in general. Some people define Goth as a subculture that got its start in the UK sometime around the 80s, and it had its roots in music. Bands like The Doors, Joy Division, Susie and the Banshees, Fields of the Nephilim, Sisters of Mercy, The Cure. Please don't at me on this. I don't want to get into any online debates about which bands are truly goth or not goth. This is just a general overview.
Some claim it's primarily the music that inspired Gothic fashion, that the two go hand in hand. But if you look back a few hundred years, there's a whole world of Gothic literature, architecture, cinema, and art that existed long before that. And there's lots of ways to define Gothic fashion. There are many different versions of this as well.
I mean, I would say as an outsider, this is a style that includes black clothes, dark hair, as Jen said, potentially brightly colored hair, very dramatic makeup. I always really loved Gothic fashion, but was not fashionable enough to pull it off.
I was too much of a goody two-shoes. It took a long time to rebel. So there's a sense of romance to Gothic fashion and a sense of tragedy. I always think of like the Romantic poets when I think of Goths, you know?
Lord Byron,
Keats, Shelley.
Oh, God, yeah.
That whole movement, especially the ones who died young of tuberculosis.
Well, tuberculosis fashion, and like Victorian tuberculosis fashion aesthetic is a huge part of the inspiration of Gothic fashion even now.
Oh, I know that.
That's all about the tide of vampires, which we will get to, trust me.
I wouldn't let her do this episode if we didn't talk about vampires.
No, I had to thoroughly explore the vampire connection or Jen was going to get after me.
So, beyond the pure aesthetic of it, Goth is a mindset that includes a preoccupation with death. There's a sense of the eerie and mysterious. There's some romanticization of death and decay. It's giving Land of the Beautiful Dead. I don't know what the hell that is.
It's a romance novel I read recently. It's about zombies, but it's like that particular title is so goth to me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very much giving like Wuthering Heights or the original Wolfman, where it's like you're cursed and doomed and also beautiful and damned. Anyway, it's giving us big callbacks to our favorite suck and fuck vampires. It's also living for steampunk. It's giving Victorian mourning culture. There's an ornateness to Goth, a decadence, a sense of decaying old world aristocracy. Again, what does all of this have to do with our Goths, with Jenny's historical boyfriend, Alaric, with the wild Germanic peoples who overthrew an empire? The connections, as we've said, are tenuous at best. But let's wind back the clock a little bit to the start of when Gothic became a word that people applied to the arts. Where does that come from?
Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So, perhaps the oldest application of the term Gothic to an artistic style has to do with architecture. The story goes that in 1550, the Italian Renaissance painter and architect Giorgio Vasari published a treatise called The Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. This was a time when the Renaissance was just getting started, a period where stylish, wealthy people in Italy were eschewing what they saw as the earlier medieval period, a time of, according to them, superstition, anti-intellectualism, blind religious faith, and dark, dank, and dreary interiors. In his book, Vasari used the term Gothic architecture to refer to buildings in what he called the, quote, barbarous German style, buildings with those dark, dank, dreary interiors we mentioned. This was a dire insult, and it was tied directly to his opinions on the Goths themselves as a people.
The Renaissance was a time that involved a renewed interest in ancient Rome as a bastion of light and learning and art and architecture and all good things. Clearly, they did not read the notes.
This is a questionable take.
Yeah, there was also more going on that was not quite so great. So, Vasari held some specific resentments towards the Gothic peoples as the ignorant, superstition-riddled barbarians who ended all of the glory that was Rome. And obviously, as we've talked for the past season, this wasn't true. The Goths and the Romans had the same general religion around the point when Rome fell, and Christian or not, the Romans were famously superstitious themselves.
This just scratches the surface of the problems with his thoughts on the Goths and the Romans.
So, Vasari had some strong opinions on the Goths. He called them, quote, barbarous and outlandish peoples who destroyed together with Italy all the finer arts, and who sacked Rome, quote, without respect for anything whatsoever. Hooligans! They were hooligans, Jenny!
Hooligans, I tell you!
Hooligans with their shenanigans and their sackings! Vasari associated the Goths with this style of architecture, which, because of his writing, people started to see as tied to a time that was uneducated, ignorant, superstitious, and quote-unquote dark. So Vasari is continuing in the proud tradition of not being aware that Theodoric the Great could read.
Anyway, so that style of architecture that Vasari called Gothic, he was disparaging so much, wasn't called that in its time. In its time, people called it various things like Latin, French, Frankish, Italian, New Work, or German style. It seems to have arisen in France, not a coincidence, although it was later adopted throughout Europe and the UK. In its time, This style was intended to be anything but dank and dark and dreary. In fact, it represented a significant step away from an earlier style that was at the time seen as the dark and dreary style then. The Gothic style, quote-unquote, was originally characterized by lightness and innovation, flying buttresses, extremely ornate and delicate interiors, and glorious, colorful stained glass that would have made the interiors of these buildings seem like open, airy, colorful palaces, like being inside a precious gem. And they're still like that today if they're well maintained.
Yeah, I mean, they're beautiful, but I will say they are dark.
Yeah, you know why that is? It's because of centuries of smoke from candles and torches that have not been cleaned off the stone. If they have cleaned them off the stone, then they're not as dark. And originally, sometimes that stone was painted.
Some of the materials they had to use were different stones than they would have used in Rome and Greece and the Mediterranean, and that's also part of it. So, the first building considered to be fully Gothic was the Abbey of Saint-Denis, built from 1135 to 1144 AD in the northern suburb of Paris. Other prime examples include the cathedrals of Rouen, Canterbury, Notre Dame, Salisbury, Sainte-Chapelle, and many, many more. This is basically the grand European cathedral, so ubiquitous, of the high and late medieval era. But it wasn't just cathedrals built in this style. It was also churches and abbeys, castles and palaces, guild halls and town halls, university buildings, and some private homes. Architectural qualities of this style included pointed arches, rib vaults, and flying buttresses. We're going to say flying buttresses so many times you might as well drink when you hear it. Intricate, delicate stonework and elaborate and colorful stained glass windows with the colored glass set in little quote-unquote chambers of intricately carved stone called tracery.
So Vasari called this architecture Gothic because it struck him as overwrought, overdesigned, dark and dreary, and representative of a barbaric, quote-unquote dark time in which the light of Roman art and learning had all been snuffed out by the barbarous Goths. But the Gothic style of architecture, as he called it, as we've said, evolved from an earlier style called Romanesque, which arose around the early 1000s AD and which also arose to imitate Roman architecture, interestingly enough. There wasn't, as far as I can tell, a widespread movement of Gothic architecture built by the actual Goths. So the Visigoths tended to repurpose old Roman buildings as their own state houses, palaces, and churches. Real examples of Visigothic architecture exist, but they're few and far between. So an example is the Basilica of Sant'Apollinare Nuovo in Ravenna, which was built by Theodoric the Great in 504 AD.
Anyway, the Gothic style of architecture was revolutionary in its time. It was designed not to be dark and dreary, but to create places of worship filled with expansive space and light. The flying buttresses, the rib vault, and other architectural innovations helped create that sense of soaring space without the need for big, blocky support columns to hold up the ceilings. To the people of the time, those buildings must have seemed miraculous for their lightness and airy space. They would have also been colorfully painted. And if you've ever been in any of these Gothic cathedrals, the sound, if you ever hear a mass or a choir practicing, it is unreal.
It is, and one of my absolute favorite things to do if I'm in a European city is go find a cathedral and figure out when they have choir practices or concerts or anything, any music in the cathedral. It's just glorious.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, a lot of times the way in which things were constructed was to magnify this sound to the heavens and then down upon you again. It's incredible. So, these cathedrals and everything in this Gothic style that was massive and huge and wonderful and light and intricate needed extensive upkeep. And it's possible that in Vasari's time, hundreds of years after these cathedrals were built, in some cases, centuries of soot had accumulated on the walls of such buildings from torches and candles, and all the bold reds and blues of the stained glass windows had darkened and had not been cleaned, again, covered with the soot. It's hard to get that off. No doubt the paint had faded, and some of these cathedrals gave off a dark, dreary, mysterious, and decayed air. As many of them were churches, which also had graveyards, the connection with death was inescapable. When you have these soaring columns and peaks. You know, when it's painted and beautiful, it's light and airy and gorgeous. But when it's not, when it's had years of rain and soot and everything else dragging it down and wearing away at it, I can see how this is happening. It kind of feels like a melted candle.
Or like, you know, a decaying skeleton or, you know, some creepy castle. Like, and this is true of, they weren't all cathedrals. Like some of them were castles or palaces or other types of buildings.
And also, Jenny, a lot of them had, like Notre Dame famously, it has its gargoyles and stuff, like its water spouts, which were intricately carved animals a lot of the time. Or like in medieval times, sometimes it would be like little imps, or like it could be little creatures, some of them creepier than others. And I think they're called, what are they? The grotesques? Is that what they are? But anyway, so you could imagine like if they were painted and bright, they might be like fun and silly. But when all the paint is worn off and it's just like a creepy looking thing spitting water on you like a gutter,
it definitely takes it to a dark place, right? And those grotesqueries and filigrees and elaborations and extremely elaborate, delicate stonework, like all of that is very hard to clean. So I could imagine that this is what happened a lot of the time, is that over time, these places kind of got this sort of air of darkness and decay from all the soot and all the fires involved in just being in a medieval city. Like, you accumulate this stuff.
Wars. I mean, depending on when we're talking about, like, it's been, you know, hundreds of years, these cities have gone through wars and they've gone through starving times, and, you know, maintaining cathedral so that it shines in the same way is not really a priority if everyone is starving.
But what did this have to do with the Goths, the historical Goths, the tribes that brought down Rome? Other than a sense that Goths were bad and barbaric and superstitious, like this architecture. There is a connection, but you'll have to bear with me because it's a tenuous one. Tenuous and fascinating. Everybody strap on your tinfoil hats and let's get going. This is so fun. I love it. I had to break this up because these are such big topics and the history is so deep. So right now what I want to focus on is the opulence of Goth. Opulence. There's no denying that Gothic cultures, whether we're talking about fashion, music, architecture, or any other type of Gothic culture, carries with it a sense of old world decaying opulence. I want to talk about that for a minute. I really want to focus on that because I think the aesthetic of the Visigoths can be tied directly to the aesthetic of Gothic architecture and maybe from there to other forms of Gothic art and fashion. I want to take you on a tour of Gothic bling.
I'm here for it. You know how much I love a shiny shiny.
Oh my God, I know. I knew you were going to like this part.
How could I not? We've talked about this many times. We read these episodes over, and when we got to this point, my first thought was, you know, there's so much about modern Gothic style, like Gothic bling, like the swords and crosses, or these very dark themed jewels. When you look at that fashion, you can honestly trace it back to potentially the raiding of early churches by early Goths. And also, as we've talked about many times, the jewels and things that the Goths were given to go away. In both the feel of that bling and the look of some of it, like, you know, those like really dark dragons or ravens or whatever, those might have been heraldic symbols that, you know, different people had that were then engraved on something also with these very ornate crosses and swords and stuff that all kind of mashed together to become what we think of as the Gothic bling style.
Yeah, and if you look at ravens and crows, I suppose, and those are carrion birds. Those are battlefield birds. You find them on the battlefield after a battle, eating the corpses of the decaying dead. Archaeologists have found Celtic coins from 200s BC or something like that with a corpse and a raven picking at it. Like, this is old stuff. So you can't say that the roots of Goth don't go that far back, because they do.
But I'll also say this, Jenny. There's another place where you would see crows and maybe even ravens. A place really tied to Gothic architecture and crumbling Gothic buildings. Outside your cathedral or church, because you'd have a graveyard. So you see how that connection all comes in? I don't remember who I was talking about this with, but it was either Jenny or somebody else. But during the Victorian era, people used to sneak away to graveyards to get it on because it was one of the few places they had privacy at night.
We discussed this in our episode with Liv when we were talking about Nosferatu. We were talking about Nosferatu on a Patreon video with Liv, the movie, and so sex and death, right? Connections.
Exactly. They've always been together, and they're together for this reason.
Well, there's many reasons. I mean, this is a connection that goes back and back and back. Like, it doesn't stop.
So raiding and pillaging and plundering had always been part of Gothic culture. And we're talking about historical Goths now. I don't know what modern Goths get up to, but I don't think it's this, but it could be.
I don't think so.
I don't want to make any assumptions, but I don't think so. And this is true going all the way back to the Gothic prehistory in Tacitus and Jordanes. In both accounts, young Gothic men felt a need to raid and pillage to prove their manliness. Chieftains had to keep up the raiding to attract followers. And frequently, because Rome was such a wealthy target, the people the Goths were plundering were Romans. It's no coincidence that the first time we hear about Goths in Roman sources, it's in 238 AD, when a group of Goths pillaged the Roman town of Histria. Alaric of the Visigoths was no different. He was no different, Jenny. I'm sorry to tell you.
I mean, it's part of the attraction, really.
To each their own. Even before he sacked Rome, he was raiding properties in Thrace, Pannonia, and other areas on the edge of the empire, and even demanding protection money from Stilicho, the great Roman general, who was also part Gothic, right?
No, I believe he was part Vandal.
Who was also part Vandal. Apologies. But it's when the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome that their material wealth ballooned.
In 409 AD, Alaric besieged Rome and shook down its occupants. Edward Gibbon tells us that when the Romans sent emissaries to try to negotiate with him, Alaric demanded, quote, all the gold and silver in the city, whether it were the property of the state or of individuals, all the rich and precious movables, and all the slaves who could prove their title to the name of barbarians. The ministers of the Senate presumed to ask in a modest and suppliant tone, if such, O king, are your demands, what do you intend to leave us? Your lives, replied the haughty conqueror. They trembled and retired. I just love Alaric quotes. It's the best thing ever.
And listeners, she definitely said haughty conqueror, but I heard it as haughty conqueror, and let's be honest, it's Jenny. She meant it both ways.
I think it's a yes and, really. Eventually, Alaric allowed himself to be negotiated down. He generously reduced his price tag for going away to, quote, the immediate payment of 5,000 pounds of gold, of 30,000 pounds of silver, of 4,000 robes of silk, of 3,000 pieces of fine scarlet cloth, and of 3,000 pounds weight of pepper.
Ooh, he liked himself some pepper.
He needed to season his meats, his sacrificial meats.
Of course, we all know how this story played out. Negotiations with Honorius broke down, Alaric did eventually wind up sacking Rome, and his army carried away vast wealth far beyond even what he'd blackmailed the wealthy populace of Rome to send outside its walls. It's said that when the Gothic army walked away from Rome, they carried with them all the wealth of an empire built up over 1,000 years, and one princess, the kidnapped Galla Placidia. What happened to all that wealth? There have been treasure hunters over the decades who believed that Alaric's wealth and treasure and booty was out there, waiting to be found. Oh, his booty. We know his booty's out there.
Listen, I wrote extensively about his booty in my book. Go and read it. It's called Enemy of My Dreams.
His booty don't quit.
Damn right.
Some believe that Alaric's treasure, and obviously his booty, was buried with him.
But Alaric's grave has never been found. Jordanes claims that he was buried in the bed of a river called Bucentis near the city of Consentia, quote, together with many treasures, unquote. Other ancient sources echo this claim. The problem is that the Goths had diverted the river and forced Roman captives to march into the riverbed to dig that grave, and then they killed all the diggers so no one would ever find it. It is a mystery.
Hot.
Sexy. There are some who believe that all the vast wealth of Roman imperialism was buried with Alaric, and there are treasure hunters who keep looking for that today. But the ancient sources hint, some outright tell us that actually most of it wasn't buried with Alaric. It was given to Galla Placidia as a dowry. I've already told the story of Galla Placidia in a very early episode. It was in our very first season that we ever did, and I've re-released it a bunch of times, so it is in our back catalog. She was the daughter of Theodosius, sister of the Emperor Honorius, and she was in Rome when Alaric sacked it. After the sacking, she left with the Goths, probably as a captive. However, she and Ataulf, Alaric's right-hand guy, fell in love, or at least that's how it's often presented in the sources. It's debatable whether this was a consensual marriage since she was kidnapped and all. I like to believe it was love because I like to believe that things weren't terrible for women all the time. So that's what I'm going with.
We like to believe the beautiful lie, as Daisy from The Great Gatsby said. I'm paraphrasing something to that nature. So I will say after this episode and the next one drops, I have a playlist on Spotify. I will add in all the tangential ones, including the Galla Placidia story. So if you want to listen to everything related to the Goths, including, the Justinian plague and things that are tangentially related, that'll be your place. And it will be on social, and we can always update it and put it on the show notes page too. So after Alaric died, the Goths, under Ataulf, who was Alaric's right-hand man, made their way up north again and eventually settled in Gaul. The couple, Ataulf and Galla Placidia, married in Gallia Narbonensis at the city of Narbonne, in the house of a prominent noble. Ingenuous. What a name. The wedding was legendary. The reception was lit. The house was all decked out, befitting a royal marriage. And as Galla Placidia presided over the festivities, a troop of beautiful youths came parading down the aisle. They were dressed in elaborate silks from far-off Asia, and they all carried in each hand an enormous platter, one piled high with gold, the other with priceless jewels.
Sexy.
So sexy. Whew! Ataulf wore the finery of a Roman noble and set his wife in a seat higher than his own. So sexy.
Sexy. He was a wife guy.
He was a wife guy. I'm here for it. I mean, that's what we're assuming. Don't add us about this. I'm not here for it.
Can we just believe for a minute that things were not terrible for women always and that this was great for Galla Placidia and she was happy? I just want to hold on to that. Leave me alone.
I just need one good thing in 2025. Don't take this from me.
I know. Deeply need to believe in this.
I need to believe that there are people who can be good to each other. I need it.
No. 100% there with you, Jen.
And an Arian bishop performed the ceremony. Priscus Attalus, Alaric's puppet emperor, sang a solo. He was there. He sang for them.
He sang a solo. It's really cute. I love it.
If you'll remember, in Gothic culture, it's the man who gives the dowry to the woman. And Galla Placidia's dowry was just as legendary as the venue. It was most likely made up of the plunder from Rome that Alaric had accumulated. I love that the man gives the dowry, that it's like, I can take care of you, babe. Look at all the wealth I'm giving you.
I know. Everything about this is so sexy.
It's so hot. It's like, look at the style to which you will be accustomed as my wife. Oh, please, more.
And now you know why I wrote a romance novel specifically about this, among other things.
This is Jen.
And Jenny.
From Ancient History Fangirl, and we're here to tell you about Jenny's scorching historical romantasy based on Alaric of the Visigoths, Enemy of My Dreams. Amanda Boucher, best-selling author of the Kingmaker Chronicle, says, quote, "This book has everything: high-stakes action, grit, ferocity, and blazing passion. Julia and Alaric are colliding storms against a backdrop of the brutal dangers of ancient Rome. They'll do anything to carve their piece out of this treacherous world and not just survive, but rule."
Enemy of My Dreams is available wherever books are sold.
Start your day with Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal. The instant oatmeal ready to help you tackle whatever your day brings. Like wrangling your toddler into their car seat. That was fun. Coaching your 6th graders soccer team. Go girls! And carrying all the groceries in one trip. Whew. Try Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal, granola, and bars. Great taste and a good source of protein. Quaker, bring out the good.
Walmart Business is in the business of saving you time, money, and hassle. Whether your business started in a garage or is a garage, Walmart Business has the tools to help you get where you're going. Tools like free shipping, multi-user accounts, and just about any item your company needs.
Even a double filtration cyclone dust collector.
Yep, even that.
Sweet.
Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love. Now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com. Terms apply.
Throughout history, royals across the world were notorious for incest. They married their own relatives in order to consolidate power and keep their blood blue. But they were oblivious to the havoc all this inbreeding was having on the health of their offspring. From Egyptian pharaohs marrying their own sisters to the Habsburgs' notoriously oversized lower jaws. I explore the most shocking incestuous relationships and tragically inbred individuals in royal history. And that's just episode 1. On the History Tea Time podcast, I profile remarkable queens and LGBTQ+ royals, explore royal family trees, and delve into women's medical history and other fascinating topics. I'm Lindsay Holiday, and I'm spilling the tea on history. Join me every Tuesday for new episodes of the History Tea Time podcast, wherever fine podcasts are enjoyed.
Of course, Ataulf and Galla Placidia's marriage did not last. I've said many times that I kind of felt a little bit entitled to just mess with the history in Enemy of My Dreams, because if I was writing a romance novel about Alaric of the Visigoths, or really anyone in this time, even if I was doing it about Ataulf and Galla Placidia and making it as historically accurate as possible, it would not be a romance novel. The idea of writing a romance novel in this time is ahistorical. Anyway, Ataulf was murdered just a few years after their wedding, and Galla Placidia was sent back to Rome to marry a Roman general that she hated. She went on to outlive him and rule as empress herself in a very badass fashion. Her treasure stayed in Narbonne. Some believe that this treasure became the vast national wealth of the Visigothic kingdom and central to its national identity. Narbonne was, at one point, the capital of a Visigothic province, and control of the region continued to be passed back and forth between the Visigoths and the Franks and Burgundians. Apparently, the vast treasure of Galla Placidia was being stored in a palace there, possibly in Ingenuous's attic this whole time, more than 100 years after Placidia went back to Ravenna. I love this.
Ingenuous did pretty good out of this deal if that's the case.
I don't think he was allowed to touch that stuff, though. I think it was just all up in his attic and he couldn't get rid of it.
Oh, I'm sure he skimmed off the top.
Fair, real fair. Remember, think back to that time the Gothic king Amalaric beat and abused his wife, the Frankish princess Clotilde, because she wouldn't convert to Arian Christianity. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how she sent a bloodied handkerchief to her brother, the Frankish king Childebert I, with a plea to come rescue her? Remember, Jen?
How could I forget that?
Remember how, when Amalaric fled Childebert's army, he turned back to get his treasure and was killed by his own men? Do you remember?
It's seared into my brain, Jenny.
That's what I thought. Well, Childebert and his army took the city and found that treasure after Amalaric's death. This was in 531 AD, more than 100 years after Galla Placidia's wedding to Ataulf. That gold would have had some dust on it, and I believe this is where this cache of Visigothic gold surfaces to the public again.
So, according to Gibbon, they discovered, quote, 60 cups or chalices, 15 patens or plates.
Is it a plate?
It says plates. Yeah, or plates for use of the communion. I was going to say it's a communion plate. 20 boxes or cases to hold the books of the Gospels. This consecrated wealth was distributed by the son of Clovis among the churches of his dominions, and his pious liberality seems to upbraid some former sacrilege of the Goths. End quote. So, Childebert was somehow distributing this wealth to churches at the Goths, who he claimed people judged for keeping it to themselves, and Gibbon goes into more detail about the treasure to be found in that dusty palace. Quote, the famous misorium, or great dish for the service of the table, of massy gold, of the weight of 500 pounds and of far superior value, from precious stones, the exquisite workmanship, and the tradition that it had been presented by Aetius the patrician to Torismond, king of the Goths. One of the successors of Torismond purchased the aid of the French monarch by the promise of this magnificent gift.
Okay, so I just want to pause and explain to you that this is a half-ton plate. Solid gold. And that's just one of the treasures. So this detail is explaining that this vast half-ton golden plate would have been presented by a Roman general, Aetius, who I'd love to do an episode about. He was around, during the Battle of Chalon, 451 AD. He presented this plate to Thorismond, one of the Visigothic kings. We definitely talked about him, probably soon after the Battle of Chalon between 451 and 453 AD, when Thorismond was assassinated. It was not part of Alaric's original booty. Gibbons says, quote, when he was seated on the throne of Spain, he delivered it with reluctance. I believe he would be Thorismund. He delivered it with reluctance to the ambassadors of Dagobert, despoiled them on the road, stipulated after a long negotiation the inadequate ransom of 200,000 pieces of gold, and preserved the missorium as the pride of the Gothic treasury. So I just need to break that down. What I'm reading is that Thorismund presented the plate to the ambassadors of Dagobert, then had them robbed on the road and took it back or possibly negotiated it back with a very subpar ransom. Either way, the massive half-ton plate wound up back in the Visigothic treasury. There is a scam happening here. This is a scam.
This is the thing, right? I'm thinking about this. So if we've got this guy sort of later on, right? Vasari, talking about how all this Gothic stuff is like, dark and dreary and bad and, whatever. You can kind of see it here in the history that they're percolating, right? That they're continuing to talk about. Like all of these incredible church things, right? These beautiful communion plates and half-ton dishes for serving stuff. Like all of this is about wealth that was given to the Goths or the Goths took.
It's mostly plunder.
It's mostly plunder, but a lot of it is religious plunder. And when it was plundered, does that make it sacrilegious? And is that why we have like so many crosses and sort of like this almost darkened version of some things, not all things, in certain Gothic fashion styles like jewelry and things like that?
We were having this conversation earlier and Jen called it dark church.
I did. I called it dark church because it's very heavy. It's like very ornate. It's not the kind of like crosses or simpler things I'd see, or even ornate in like a flowery kind of way. It's very dark and heavy. It's dark church.
And dark and heavy is exactly what the Visigothic bling aesthetic was. And we're getting to that.
Yeah, and is that because they were making a comment on this plundered items and what happened to them after they were plundered with like their religious value? Did it darken them in some way?
Look, our tinfoil hats are fully on at this point as we discuss this, but I think it's 100% possible because this is blood money. It was acquired through plunder. They plundered one church to give it to another church when they gave it to anyone at all, and sometimes they, took it back through nefarious means like Thorismund did. So this is church plunder. And another thing that's really interesting about this for me, and this is kind of a little bit of a side quest, but you know how there's this narrative of Alaric's sacking being the kinder, gentler sacking where he didn't really sack the churches. This gives the lie to that because there's all this church plunder in the plunder. Where do you think that came from?
I mean, it had to come from someone plundering something.
The richest churches in the empire. It came from Rome, Jen.
Of course it did.
Don't let the propaganda fool you. That was not a kinder, gentler sacking.
Parts of the vast state treasury of the Visigoths were eventually broken up and plundered and gifted away. And for a while, we're told its iconic treasures circulated among later conquerors. But for a time, it was ancient and legendary and integral to their national identity. Gibbon explains, quote, some portion of the Gothic treasures might be the gift of friendship or the tribute of obedience, but the far greater part had been the fruits of war and rapine, the spoils of the empire, and perhaps of Rome.
See, he agrees with us.
He does. He's got his tinfoil hat on too. Maybe it's not tinfoil. Maybe it is made of luxurious, solid Gothic gold with those creepy crosses at the top and blood-red rubies. Maybe there's like a fire crackling behind us and it's very metal.
Yeah, hot.
Let's not talk about the ridiculous chainmail undergarments we'd be wearing at this time period if we're definitely metal.
I've been wearing my chainmail undergarments since I started this series. I don't know about you.
Oh, no, I'm not in this time period. I'm a Maenad. Free and easy. But some still remained in the Visigoths' attic. Arab invaders conquered Hispania in 711 AD and raided the Visigothic treasury again. When they did, they found an artifact of even greater value. Quote, a table of considerable size of one single piece of solid emerald, encircled with 3 rows of fine pearls, supported by 365 feet of gems and massy gold, and estimated at the price of 500,000 pieces of gold. Damn!
So this table, this ridiculous fucking table, Jen and I have discussed this table in other episodes and just how batshit this detail is. Like, it is a table with 365 legs. It is made of a solid emerald. We have to discuss this more, and we will, because I found enough information on it. We're going to do a Patreon. I'm so excited. So from the earliest times, the Visigoths were known for their wealth. I swear to God, we're bringing this back to Goth. We are. Perhaps even became associated with a certain decadence of style. And that treasury would not have simply been locked away all the time. As we've said, Gothic kings were obligated to give out treasures to their allies and to be seen doing it. It's my theory that over time, the Visigoths became associated with vast decadent wealth because of how much of it they had to give away to maintain their influence and how much of it they were sitting on. The Visigoths in particular had that great state treasure. One of the best examples of this we have comes in the form of the most uniquely Visigothic jewelry, votive crowns. This is what we're both wearing right now. We're both wearing votive crowns. Lots of religious treasure was found in the Visigothic hoard. Massive plates and candlesticks from church altars, ornate boxes to hold the Gospels, all that sort of thing. They plundered many of these items from churches in Rome and other cities over the centuries. But when they were the kings of the Visigothic kingdom, they also gave some of these treasures away, including to churches.
Votive crowns are very elaborate gifts to the church from the Visigothic kings, and these were not plundered treasures from centuries ago. They were newly made for this purpose. In 1858, a priceless cache of treasures, including votive crowns, was found just about 8 miles outside of Toledo, once the Visigoths' capital city. The discovery consisted of 14 crowns cast of bronze and 8 of gold, encrusted with precious stones, garnets, sapphires all the way from Sri Lanka, pearls and emeralds, as well as rock crystal and colored glass. I mean, clearly I got a gold one with all those sapphires and maybe a couple garnets.
Occasionally they cheaped out with the colored glass.
Not on mine.
Not on mine either. Mine weighs 500 pounds, okay?
Exactly. Mine broke my neck, but it was a great way to go.
Exactly. Hot.
Oh, the things I do for fashion. One of these crowns had a set of gem-encrusted letters hanging on chains below the band, spelling out Recusvinthus, Rex offeret, or Recuswinth, the king, offers this. You know, I feel like I've seen some of these crowns in the Met.
You might have. There's a really great collection of Gothic jewelry in the Met, and I actually want to go back and look at it again because some of the pieces I've Googled I think are there. I might do that and just take pictures for our Instagram, Jen.
Yeah, I mean, next time I come up, I'm happy to go with you again if you haven't gone by then. So, this is the treasure of Gwarizar. The crowns were gifts to the Catholic Church in the 600s from King Recuswinth and his son Swinthilla. They date to roughly 649 to 672 AD. They are vastly ornate and heavy and ostentatious and glorious, made with an elaborate filigree pattern that demonstrates a true fusion of the Visigothic, or Byzantine styles, and ancient Iberian gold crafting techniques. That's the iconic image of Visigothic gold, vast, ornate, heavy, dark, opulent.
But they didn't just give pieces like this away. They also wore it, and pieces inspired by it. Let's talk about the jewelry favored by the Visigothic noble class.
On December 12th, Disney Plus invites you to go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in an exclusive 6-episode docuseries.
I wanted to give something to the fans that they didn't expect. The only thing left is to close the book.
The end of an era. And don't miss Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the final show, featuring for the first time the Tortured Poets Department. Streaming December 12th, only on Disney Plus.
Hello everyone, Takuya here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, I mean, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
I love this so much. So, a paper published in Project Muse by John Batten and Rose Walker goes into detail on the personal style of the Goths. It's called Art in Spain and Portugal from the Romans to the Early Middle Ages, Roots and Myths. They claim that the Visigoths' vast treasure acted as a kind of cultural identifier, separating Goths from Romans. And if you remember, there was also a Roman elite in the Visigothic kingdom, but there was so much of a chasm, like a cultural and religious chasm between the two, that the Goths in that Gothic elite felt a need to separate themselves from the Romans, and one of the ways they did that was through fashion, according to this article. It says, this vast treasure, like I mentioned, quote, constituted not only the wealth of the Visigothic rulers, but also their memory as a social group in which the Hispano-Romans could not participate. The Visigoths were like, the bling is ours, it is not yours.
Damn.
They hated the Romans, and it was mutual, trust me.
The Visigothic kingdom had both Gothic and Roman nobles, and these two groups mostly did not integrate well. The Romans who lived in this area, either immigrants or those who had been here since it was a Roman territory, were on the outside of this culture of fabulous wealth, even as that culture emulated and appropriated Roman fashion, and even as it was comprised of their own country's sacked treasures.
Isn't that a kick in the teeth?
Yup. It feels kind of apt based on what happened to the Goths in their own history by the Romans.
If you go back and listen to our episode about Rome's Gothic immigrants, you're gonna feel like what goes around comes around. It's a little bit of karmic justice. Maybe not enough, but a little.
In this article, Batten and Walker discuss the role of wealth in Visigothic society and how jewelry fashions changed among the Visigothic upper class. For instance, Gothic women often wore two brooches, one on each shoulder. This goes all the way back to the Chernikov culture at Graves. In the Visigothic kingdom, it was fashionable at certain times for women to wear crossbow-shaped fibulae, specifically derived from Roman military imagery.
I feel like the Visigothic upper class was wearing their jewelry at the Roman upper class. For men, imperial officers' badges were modeled on brooches originally fashioned on the cloaks of Roman military officers. It was fashionable, in other words, in the Visigothic kingdom to wear jewelry styled after Roman military fashion, including, notably, a pair of matching fibulae in the form of two cloisonné eagles facing each other. I know I've seen these eagles before. If I find them, we will put them on our Instagram and possibly in our show notes, depending on where I find them. Anyway, Batten and Walker points out a number of jewelry pieces found in this style, from large fibulae to belt buckles, headwear, necklaces, and earrings, that repurposed ancient Roman military iconography. They claim the style, quote, reinvented imperial iconography for the adornment of women and in a way that appealed especially to the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. Even Theodoric the Great used to say, quote, this is a specific quote from Theodoric. He's crashing our podcast to tell us this.
Hold up, kids. Theodoric's back.
He has something to say. Quote, a poor Roman plays the Goth. A rich Goth, the Roman.
Ooh. Over the centuries, cloisonné became an iconic style associated with the Visigoths. Cloisonné is an ancient method of decorating metalwork with colored materials separated by metal strips or gold wire, creating little compartments, little hidden poison chambers maybe.
It looks like stained glass.
Oh, okay. I know what you mean. So the colored materials inside those compartments can be glass, paste, vitreous enamel, or precious stones. The quote-unquote barbarian cultures of the migration era, including the Goths, became known for a style of cloisonné known as garnet cloisonné, where the red garnets were set in small, thick-walled cloisons or wire frames, usually of gold. Red, blood, Gothic, vampire, just saying.
Coincidence?
I think not. This style of jewelry was originally from the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines. It first came to the Visigoths in a variety of ways, through plunder, imperial gifts, and trade. It's a very unique look. Pieces of garnet cloisonne look heavy, kind of dark, ornate, and very, very rich. And that is one thing I will say about Gothic fashion. It looks heavy and rich.
The opulence of Goth.
So pieces have been found with cloisons, little wire chambers, in the shape of geometric patterns, flowers, and leaves, animals, and more. It creates a look that is very intricate and, as we've said, ornate. A look that resembles nothing more than the stained glass in the Gothic-style church and the delicate filigreed ornateness of its stonework.
Here's where I'm bringing it home. So, what's the connection between that and the Gothic architecture as described by Giorgio Vasari 1,000 years later? Again, it's a tenuous one, but think about it. If you've ever been inside any of these cathedrals, I know Jen and I both have, they do resemble something from Gothic culture, the cloisonne jewelry that was so in fashion at the time. If you've ever seen this type of cloisonne that was prevalent in that place and time, it looks like the stained glass in those cathedrals. Each piece of colored precious stone or glass is set inside an ornate filigreed little wire chamber, just like the glass in those windows is set within similarly ornate chambers of stone or metal. Similar colors are used, heavy on the highly saturated rich reds and blues and other jewel tone colors. The architectural flourishes on Gothic buildings are as ornate and intricate as the details on those brooches and votive crowns.
Walking inside one of those cathedrals is like walking inside a Gothic brooch, turned inside out and blown up into a church. So just from an aesthetic standpoint, there is a connection between what came to be known as Gothic architecture and the Byzantine jewelry the Visigothic nobles wore, as well as the decadent wealth of a decayed time that they were known for plundering and hoarding, even as they gave it away so freely. And I will say, as someone who grew up religious, like those dark cathedrals, when you have a Sunday worship that's particularly like at Christmas, when you've got like the purple from Advent or like the red of a cardinal coming in, it really like changes the vibe, right? Rather than like sort of everyday masses where your priest might wear black. When you have like these special holy occasions, all of a sudden those dark, dreary churches are hit with these like bright pops of light and color. And I feel like the Visigothic jewelry that we're talking about here, and some of it would have been ceremonial for masses, was another bright pop of color. Of course, the Ostrogoths had a connection to this type of jewelry too.
So I have made the argument, Jen, that the opulence of Goth is connected to the Visigoths. And the reason that I connect it specifically to the Visigoths is because they had that super iconic national treasure that was plundered specifically from Rome during Alaric's time.
By Nicolas Cage. Sorry, not by Nicolas, but maybe.
I have always suspected that Nicolas Cage is an ageless vampire. It's quite possible.
And we know he likes to treasure hunt, so, you know.
Right, we could make that argument as well, but the larger point is that the opulence of Goth comes directly from the Visigoths and their national treasure. However, we cannot discount that the Ostrogoths also had quite a lot of bling.
Yeah, of course they did. So the Ostrogoths had a connection to this type of jewelry too. We've talked about how during their 75 years of Hunnic dominion, Ostrogothic kings who followed Attila the Hun were enriched beyond their wildest dreams. Much of the jewelry found in the tombs of Ostrogothic kings under Attila was also in this striking cloisonne style. So Ostrogothic kings must have been known for this elaborate, decadent style as well.
Peter Heather offers some clarity about the evidence in the ground about the wealth of Ostrogothic kings. Get ready. Quote, "These rich burials are not just quite rich, they are staggeringly so. They contain a huge array of gold fittings and ornamentation, the stars of the collection being the cloisonne gold and garnet jewelry in which the stones are mounted in their gold cases to give an effect not unlike mosaics or, this is my addition, stained glass. This kind of work would later become the mark of elites everywhere in the late and post-Roman periods. For instance, the style of the cloisonne jewelry found in the Sutton Hoo ship burial of the early 7th century in East Anglia originally gained its hold on elite imaginations in Hunnic Europe. One burial at Apahida, modern Transylvania, produced over 60 gold items, including a solid gold eagle that fitted onto its owner's saddle. Every other piece of this individual's horse equipment was likewise made of gold, and he himself was decked from head to foot in golden jewelry. Suck it. So, that is the connection between the opulence of Goth and the historical Goths. this jewelry, this vast wealth, this cloisonne, and it certainly was dark too because it was blood money, plundered from ancient churches to give to the newer churches, and also taken from people's homes, pagan temples, and everywhere else. Jen, what do you think of this connection?
I mean, I think it's all true. Like, I don't see any problems with this. I feel like my tinfoil hat is like, I've put it on a few times, but for the most part, it's remained in my pocket because, like, I see all the logical leaps here. I don't think we're going that much out on a limb yet. Please tell me we get to go further out on a limb.
We do, Jen. So, in our next episode, we're going to explore the darkness of Goth, the occult of Goth, the preoccupation with death, and the vampire aesthetic. Could it be that this came from the Ostrogoths, just like the opulence came from the Visigoths? I mean, there's definitely a lot of crossover because you could definitely argue that the opulence came from both, and that is also true of the darkness and the vampire aesthetic and all of that. But I am going to show my work that that is primarily an Ostrogothic thing.
Swoon.
So in the meantime, come and find us on all the social platforms at Ancient History Fangirl. Sign up for our newsletter, which is on our website, ancienthistoryfangirl.com, and join our Patreon. If you join our Patreon, we will not sack your city, just like the Huns.
I make no promises, like, girls gotta eat. It's tough times out here. If your city's in my way...
All I'm saying is that this is protection money.
Yeah, if you're on the Patreon, I won't sack your city.
The higher of a level you pay in the Patreon, the less of a chance we will sack your town. I'm gonna say, though, that the risk is never zero.
At least we're honest, right?
Anyway, you can pay us protection money at patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl.
Or you can just pay to support us and we're not shaking you down, because I don't think we should shake people down.
Jen's the nice hun.
I am.
She's the nice one, I'm the mean one. I guess that's my role.
I mean, somebody has to be.
Someone's got to be the carrot and someone's got to be the stick, right?
And I already have the red hair, so...
We already know that she's the real mean one because she has no soul.
Not my fault I was born this way.
No, it's not your fault. I will defend that to the death. We do have some patrons to thank. Apologies if we mispronounce anyone's name. We really hope we don't.
Thank you so much to Clay Epperson,
Nikki, just Nikki,
Addie Lepre,
Lily Zhao,
and Lori, just Lori.
Thank you all so much for your support. We may or may not sack your town. Probably not.
Please don't sue us. I literally have nothing but my dog.
And our massy plate of gold, which is hard to exchange for actual cash money these days.
You have the plate. I just get to look at it on Sundays. At church.
You mean dark church? Anyway, thank you so much for your support. We will see you whenever we see you next. Hey everyone, it's Jenny and Jen here, and as a special extra treat, we are giving you a section of the audiobook version of my novel, Enemy of My Dreams.
This is actually the opening chapter or prologue of Jenny's book, and it happened in the aftermath of the Battle of Frigidus in 394 AD, when the Romans put their Gothic auxiliaries in the front of the battle to take most of the casualties. Alaric was leading that band, and he lost about 10,000 men. In Jenny's version of the story, that's the inciting event that radicalizes him towards revolution.
We hope you enjoy this extra snippet, and the book is now out in stores. It is so exciting, and the audiobook is also out, and it is narrated by the brilliant Lisa Flanagan, who does such a good job. I really love her narration. It is so good, and she really brings it to life. Pick it up wherever you get books or audiobooks.
3 days after the last battle ended, the mighty Bora still stalked the floodplain. It shrieked and murmured amongst the broken war machines and sent dust spirals walking amidst the dead. The men were saying it was the wind that won them this war, that the gods had sent it to drive the enemy's arrows back in their faces. Alaric of the Goths set his back to the battlefield, the Bora snapping his cloak around his heels. Someone should tell the gods then that the thrice-damned battle is over. Before him the usurper Eugenius knelt on the ground. Even kneeling, he was thin and stooped as an overtall reed. The wind filled the executioner's stained cloak like a tattered sail and snatched the words from the condemned man's mouth. 10,000 of his own dead to achieve this. Half the Federati, and the Romans had barely scratched their breastplates. A heavy hand clapped down on Alaric's shoulder. Well done. The General Stilicho smiled, jovial as Saturnalia. Without you, we never would have taken that valley. You have covered yourself in glory these past days. Glory. Alaric felt a muscle in his jaw clench. There had been nothing glorious about what happened in that valley. He'd walked out covered only in blood. His men's as much as his enemies. The Emperor Theodosius stepped out of the crowd below, swollen with his own importance. He interrupted Eugenius's last words with a speech about the Christian God who'd brought them victory. Mercifully, the wind obscured most of it. The Emperor will want to see you, Stilicho said. He will want account of your dead, and if you play it right, there will be a reward. You mean the homeland he promised? Alaric could not keep the bitterness from his voice. For years, Theodosius had been promising land. Always after the next great victory and the next. His people were still landless and homeless. And now half of them were dead. If that was a coincidence, he'd eat his own boots. Must you do this every time? Stilicho let out an aggrieved sigh. The Emperor owes this victory to you, but you must be politic, Alaric. You stand to gain much, given time. Alaric shook his head grimly. If there was one thing his people did not have, it was time. He remembered the Huns sweeping down from the eastern hills, lines of homesteads burning. It was an old memory, one from his childhood, but it was still happening. Stilicho glanced at his battered, blood-stained cuirass and frowned. Be sure to clean yourself up first. Cut your hair, for God's sake. Try not to look so much like a barbarian. Down below, Theodosius had finished his talk of God. He gave an impassive nod to the executioner. The Bora stopped just as the axe fell. The imperial tent was full of rich fabrics and rare wood, all the comforts the emperor could not do without on campaign. Theodosius sat with his head bent over a solid oak desk, making scratch marks on a wax tablet, his scalp pink with sunburn. Alaric thought of the bent backs, the sweat and suffering that had brought the emperor's desk this far. At length, Theodosius spoke. Your report? By my reckon, we lost 10,000. The emperor's hand stilled. Tell me how you managed to lose half of the Federati. The scouts told us that the rim was clear. It wasn't. The archers picked us off like turtles in a bucket. And you lost 10,000 of my Gothic troops! Theodosius set his stylus down and regarded him coldly. Eyes narrowed like a merchant who suspected weevils in the grain. Stilicho says that without your valor we would all be meat for the crows. But I know that God won us this war. He was the one who sent the wind. Emperor, with respect, Alaric said flatly, your God did not suffer and die to win you that valley. And it serves you to credit him, since he asks neither payment nor land in return. You have a lot of nerve, Theodosius frowned. Perhaps you do not realize you are speaking to your greatest ally, Alaric. I've defended you before the Senate, and you've done nothing to make my work easier. Your people are ungovernable. They pillage when they should be farming. I visit your camps to find women and children wandering about in a war zone. If I granted your people land now, how would I know they would farm it rather than simply using it as a base for plunder? They would not have to follow my army if they had land of their own. If the women and children had somewhere safe to go, I've offered to settle them in camps. Over his steaming corpse. People die like rats in those camps. How do you think it will look to the Senate if I settle 10,000 armed Goths in the Danube Valley so soon after Eugenius turned? If your people turned to pillaging honest Romans, I'd expect to be stoned in the streets." Theodosius paused to pour himself wine, offering none. "Eugenius was part Frankish, you know. My people are Tervingi. That isn't even the same tribe. You know that, and I know that. But to the Senate and the people, you are all the same." Theodosius picked up his stylus and resumed his scratchings. "You are dismissed. You will keep your current position, but only because the Federati are loyal to you. Be grateful for my generosity." Alaric felt his teeth clench, as if it were not abundantly clear how the Romans saw his people. Barbarians, all of them. The Romans could give them the trappings, but in the end, it was his people in the valley fighting more of his people and the Romans reaping the reward. Stilicho would want him to bow and scrape, to make a conciliatory gesture toward the Emperor's god. But he would fear no little man in a tent. Not after what he'd lived through. "How long do you think I can keep the Federati loyal, Emperor?" Alaric said quietly. "If they are not paid in full." Theodosius's eyes snapped up. "Is that a threat?" "When I make a threat, you will know it." For a moment, everything stilled. In the Emperor's face was the usual calm disdain. Something made Alaric glance at his upraised hand. It trembled. The Emperor feared him. Suddenly Alaric understood. Theodosius had known he would walk into a slaughter. And Stilicho had given the order to thin out his numbers against future rebellion. They both thought he'd be next to turn. Deliberately, Theodosius put down his stylus. "You'll do well to remember whose camp you are in," he said evenly, "and whose guards are just outside. And you will do well to remember exactly who the Federati are loyal to." Alaric bared his teeth in an expression that was nothing like a smile. "Pay my men what you owe them, Emperor. Otherwise you had better pray to your god for another wind." Stilicho thought he would turn. It would be a shame to disappoint the great man.
Do you want to live longer, think faster, or just perform better at everything? I'm Dave Asprey, and I founded the biohacking movement to show you that you can take control of your own biology. I created the Human Upgrade podcast to show you exactly how. Discover the protocols that upgrade your mitochondria, optimize your brain, and transform your performance at every level from spiritual all the way down to your cells. You can learn from more than 1,400 people who've been on the show, including world-class scientists, and you can apply what works today by filter out the BS for you. Skip the guesswork, learn how to get the results to feel healthier and happier. Subscribe to the Human Upgrade podcast and start biohacking your life. You might really like the way you feel.